Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Dr. Amber Arshad and today my topic of presentation is Healthful Housing under supervision of Professor Dr. Saira Afzal. In this presentation, I shall be giving a brief introduction of what is housing, what are the needs of housing, what are the standards or the minimum standards of a good housing for a good quality of life, fact of poor housing, overcrowding, some of the efforts that has been done in Pakistan recently for improving housing, recent updates, and an MCQ session at the end. At the end of the presentation, the participants will be able to describe the importance of healthful housing in terms of health indicators and related effects, and also the standards for good housing to improve the quality of life. So housing is actually term shelter, which is often used to term shelter is often used to define housing, and it has a strong connection with the purpose of housing throughout the world. And the mental image of the shelter is a safe, secure place that provides both privacy and protection and gives a good environment of living. What are the needs of housing? The fundamental needs are to fulfill the psychological and the physiological needs, protection against the diseases, protection against injuries like fires and electrical shocks, and protection against toxic and explosive gases. So, in order to have a good housing and an improved life, there are some physiological needs that needs to be met before considering a good housing for the people, like protection from the thermal environment, like undue heat loss, adequate thermal environment that will permit the adequate heat loss from the body, and atmosphere for a reasonable chemical purity, daylight illumination, and proper daylight and undue daylight glare with excessive noise are not very favorable, and adequate space for children to play. So the psychological needs is the adequate privacy for the individuals, opportunities for normal family life, including the facilities to maintain the cleanliness and possible for static satisfaction of the home and for the local community as well. So some of the a brief historic perspective that it's an old concept and it started in early 1800s, and housing condition and health was earlier recognized, and it was led to a good sanitary reform movement. So with the industrialization and urbanization, there were decreased facilities for good housing, adequate standards were met, and eventually the quality of life started decreasing. Builders and eager to capitalize on the needs of housing, build inferior housing is congested areas was preferred with the increasing growth population. Until recently, most people in the West felt their homes were much healthier than in the past, but we are now facing a problem that is a sick building syndrome. It is a badly polluted area, and drinking water, chemical vapors, synthetic building materials, and fields from electrical supplies and appliances all makes us worried about just how healthy our houses really are. So a sick building syndrome is the feeling of illness among majority of the occupants. Symptoms are headache, fatigue, irritations, and shortness of breath. Lately, the world's urban population will be doubled by 2050, and will require housing solutions. And over 90% of the urban growth in the developing cities is informal settlements, and slum dwellers are likely to grow dramatically. So, in both developed and developing countries, improving housing conditions and reducing health risk in the home is thus in critical importance. So healthy housing, this picture is to just emphasize on the importance of the healthy housing by avoiding some of the indicators that could improve the overall housing. So this is the document that was given by WHO recently: Health, Environment, and Sustainable Development Goals. And this picture all depicts the housing and the health risks we are facing nowadays. So, what are the health risks we are facing? One of them is overcrowding because of the small areas of the small square feet of the housing, and rising prices and rents of the houses. The overall outdoor pollution, the overall indoor pollutions due to smoking and use of electrical appliances, and lack of green space. So there must be some housing standards to improve the overall housing in a country, and for the people, and increase the convenience for the people. So housing standards depends on conventional factors. For per capita space, floor space, on social, economic characteristics such as family income, family size, standard of living, lifestyle stages in life. But despite cultural, climate, social diversities, housing standards vary from country to country. So it all depends on the site. For example, the site, as whenever the site of the housing is considered, then it should be elevated, that is prevented from floods. The area where the housing is built should be accessible, away from vector breeding places, away from the areas like industrial areas that would have more dust, smoke, and stink. The soil should be dry and safe, and pleasant surroundings with lots of green plantations. So there is also an area, an open space around the house that is known as a setback, and there should be an adequate space all around for the light and ventilation, including the windows and the doors. Build-up area should not be more than one third of the total area of the occupied by the residents, and in the urban areas, this may be compromised to two-thirds due to the cost of the land. There are some standards for the floor. That floor should be impermeable, smooth, free of cracks, and damp proof, and should be reasonably strong. The walls for the walls they should be reasonably strong, should not absorb or conduct heat. Weather resistant with paints available in the markets, suitable for unsuitable for pest infestations, and not easily damaged. The material, the quality of the material matters here a lot. For the roof, the standard is that it should not be less than 3 meters or 10 feet. That is ideal for an ideal housing. For the rooms, number of rooms vary with the number of persons living in a setting. So the number of area and rooms should be increased according to the family size. It is later on explained in a table how many rooms are appropriate for how many people. For the floor area, the occupancy by more than one person is at least 120 square feet, and at least 90 square feet for occupancy by a single person. For more than one person is 120, and for one person it is 90 square feet. The floor area available in the living rooms per person should not be less than 50 square feet, and the optimum is 100 square feet. For the windows, every living room should be provided with at least two windows, and windows should be placed with a proper standard like 3 feet above the ground, and windows should be 1/5 of the floor, and doors and windows combined should be 2/5 the floor area. So ventilation system is also very important. There are several types of ventilations that are important, like the whole home mechanical ventilation systems are mostly used, with exhaust ventilations, mechanical balanced ventilations, and supply only ventilations. So exhaust ventilation systems works by depressurizing your homes. The ideal mechanical ventilation is the energy recovery ventilation systems that minimizes the waste and actively reclaim energies. There is also important to have a natural ventilation in the house, like position your windows and doors strategically. Be clever with your window choices. Consider cross ventilation, which is very important in case whenever you are considering natural ventilation, get technical and get the air moving. For the kitchens, it is important that every dwelling house must have a separate kitchen, protected from the contaminants, and have a water supply and a sink. And floor should be impermeable, and daylight factor is 10%. For essential housing, privy is important. Garbage and refuse, water supply, and cowshed. So garbage and refuse should be removed from the dwelling area at least daily. Water supply, as you know, that it is should be adequate, and supply should be available all the time. And cowshed, if you are having some kind of animals in the premises, then it should be separate from the house at almost 25 feet distance from the dwelling. So some of the importance of a daylight factor. Daylight factor is the daylight availability metric that expresses as a percentage the amount of daylight available inside the room compared to the amount of unobstructed daylight available outside under overcast sky conditions. The higher the daylight factor, the more daylight is available in the room. It is actually 2% or more can be considered as a daylit average, But with electrical lighting, and with its the room appears strongly lit, and the average DF for such condition is 5%. So for a domestic building like kitchen achieves the minimum daylight factor at least 2%, and in living rooms, dining rooms, studies achieve a minimum average daylight factor of 1.5%. And 80% of the working planes should receive a direct light from the sky. So this is 2%, and this shows how the 5% daylight factor illuminates the whole room. Overcrowding, this refers to a situation in which more people are living in a single dwelling, that there is a space for the and the movement of and the space and the movement is restricted. So coming to the number of rooms and how the maximum number of people are recommended. So one room is ideally recommended for 2%. If there are two rooms, then it's a comfortable dwelling for three people. With three rooms, it's comfortable for 5%. With four rooms, 7, and from five rooms, it's 10. And more than 5 rooms adds 2% to each with additional room after 5. So what are the effects of poor housing? Poor housing poses different health risks, and in all age groups like children, adults, and geriatric population. And the common infections that are occurring that could occur due to poor housing are commonly the respiratory infections, including cold, tuberculosis, influenza, diphtheria, bronchitis, measles, and whooping cough. Skin infections like scabies, leprosy, plague due to pest infestations or rat infestations, arthropod related diseases, and accidents are also very common. So it is important of raising standards and reducing inequalities under the Sustainable Developmental Goals under WHO, and the goals that are achieved that are targeted to be achieved for the healthy housing are goal number 3, that is good health and well-being. SDG 7 is the focus of affordable and clean energy. SDG 10 is reduced inequality. SDG 11 sustainable cities and communities, and 13 the climate actions. So all these are focused for if a country can improve all these SDGs related to these healthy housing, then overall housing and the quality of life would be increased. So WHO housing and health guidelines, the existing guidelines were that the water quality, outdoor air quality, indoor air quality, neighboring noise, and other metals in the groundwaters, and other use of materials like lead in lead pipes, and the use of asbestos should be considered. But the new recommendations also includes the overcrowding, the low indoor temperatures, the high indoor temperatures, the injury hazards in home, the proximity of house to walking and cycling infrastructures, and accessibility of housing for people with functional impairments. So these are the new added points in the new recommendations under WHO guidelines. To realize this vision, urban decision makers must apply health lens to the urban policies and programs, and WHO is working at country level to assist the assessment of key housing risk for health at national level, support ministries for health and housing and urban planning, apply validated tools for assessing expected impacts of interventions, support capacity building, and communicate country success stories, and advocate for housing and health and global flora. So WHO response providing evidence-based guidance is WHO Housing Health Guidelines have been present since 2010, and recently few points has also been added as mentioned in the previous slides. Support to the countries in implementing guidelines is also being provided, which will work with the country partners to develop tools and strategies, and support to countries in policies and interventions. And WHO is also collaborating with different partners from UN as well. Other like there are also other agencies that are working in advocacy, and WHO is advocating the prioritized actions with Habitat and these other NGOs, and promoting the healthy housing for all towards an implementing strategy for WHO housing and health guidelines. This was the updated report of that is given in 2020. So, coming to the end of this document, there is a proposed element of implementation strategies. One is for promotion of research generation and synthesis. Second is a modular toolkit promoting evidence informed policy making. Third, communicating knowledge translation activities, capacity building measures for homes and health student and professionals, and testing and validation of elements of implementing strategies and tools for the projects. So coming to Pakistan, recently there has been some efforts by different governments to improve the overall housing. There was a Naya Pakistan housing scheme, and this was a project that was directed for public-private partnership and would be funded and supported, subsidized, and encourage the state to develop cheap houses in lower income groups. This was also one of the project that was started, Mera Pakistan Mera Ghar, and it was by the State Bank of Pakistan that were giving the loans, and also there were subsidized schemes. But coming to the conclusion, the reality is that the Senate report is quite depressing, and it is even worse that even those numbers that have been made to look better, they are not there. And the bottom line is that there isn't any value of addition of these projects by the Pakistan government through public-private partnership, and all these issues were not addressed, and these all schemes are only in the planning stages right now. So there are some recent updates. There is a sustainable housing indicators and improving quality of life. The case of two residential areas in Baghdad. So it was a general a study showing the determined the disparity of sustainability for residential environments. The research focused on internal indicators, including affordable housing, conditions of dwelling, and external indicators like social services, infrastructure, transports. And this was done for studying the two residential cities. And the main objective was to evaluate the level of urban quality life through sustainable housing indicators based on subjective indicators. So it was just to show how the indicators are important in considering the housing and the quality of life. Later on, the Healthy Sustainable Housing Index, this was a pilot study, and this was aimed, and this the aim of this pilot study was to evaluate the link between housing and children's respiratory symptoms. And it was observed that school children who are inhabitant of sufficient quality housing shows reduced nose irritations, and component one with allergic symptoms regarding the component one, that is ventilation, lighting, and cloth washing, and three times less duration of common cold with component two, that was construction material, painted walls, types of bathrooms, and the compared to the poor quality house habitants. Now it's the need of climate resilient housing in Pakistan, a brief a policy brief. So by 2050, it was predicted that more than double the number of people would live in informal settings. And due to poverty and lack of ability of quality housing, more people are compelled to live in substandard settings, that is not resilient to bear natural disasters. And moreover, their houses are built up from poor material that is prone to risk. And the increase in temperature due to the deletion of the ozone layer will increase the frequency and intensity of floods and occurrence of droughts. Nonetheless, with the continuous increase in urbanization, most people are moving towards the climate vulnerable cities, and it is a dire need to invest in a climate smart, affordable housing. So, but this was a little late. This was a back lead. It was published in back in 2017, but this it was in reference to Pakistan. So I've added in the last that housing quality, it was assessed on these indicators I've already mentioned, and the health issues were assessed. The result of the study indicated that residents are suffering from multiple diseases, as I have already told that one of the factors is to have these indicators considered at all under the SDGs, and the public-private partnerships with the with this climate resilient housing, all would improve the conditions and housing conditions in Pakistan. So this was all for the presentation. This was just a brief table that was given how physical indicators affect the related health issues. This was the biological indicators and how the diseases occur. These are chemical indicators, and the social indicators, how they affect. And this article was really interesting. So now it's time for the MCQs. Aslam, 29-year-old, Akram, 32-year-old, Khalida, age 30 years old, residing in house with kid of 6 months. The house comprised of three ventilated rooms. How many persons can reside in this house where there are three well ventilated rooms? 2 persons, 3 persons, 4 persons, 5 persons, 10 persons.
5.
Yes, D is the right answer, and accordingly, they are living. The number of people described in the scenario, so they are overall their housing standards are met. An outbreak of scabies is reported in an XY area where houses are small, overcrowded. Government water supply provides water to that area. The appropriate preventive measures suggested by you would be to filter the water, chlorinate the water, improve accessibility of water, avoid walking barefoot, improve the sewage pipelines.
D.
Um, Actually, it's C, improve the accessibility of water because as you know that for scabies, cleanliness is very important, and having more and more accessibility to water, people would be able to combat this disease. While visiting rural houses in nearby villages, a sanitary inspector reports that most houses are not confirming the sanitary and health standards, especially maintaining the distance between residential areas and the cattle sheds, which should be at least how many feet as per standards? 20 feet, 25 feet, 30 feet, 35 feet, or 10 feet. It's ideally 25 feet whenever you are. And nowadays, it's very common in also in the urban areas where people are having these cattle sheds for their own needs. So it's very important to have an awareness that it should be at least 25 feet from the dwelling. For a construction of houses, there is mandatory to follow some standards. Which of the following statement regarding healthful housing is not correct? The house the dwelling should be elevated from the surroundings. The site is where the dwelling is present is it must be in the pleasing surrounding. It is ideal to construct a house in made soil. Should have an independent access to street of adequate width, and there should be an open space around the house.
E.
E.
D is the right answer. D should be have an independent access to the street of adequate width. Daylight factor is the ratio of illumination at a given point indoor of illumination at point of outdoors exposed to the whole sky, expressed as percentage. Which is the daylight factor recommended from strongly lit living room? A strongly lit living room where the daylight and the electricity light is added. The recommended daylight factor. 2%, 4%, 5%, 8%, 10%.
Alpha.
It's a it's daylight factor without it's only daylit, but strongly daylit includes electricities and bulbs and tube lights we use, so it's 5%. Constructed area should be two-thirds in urban and one-third in rural areas. The mandatory open area around healthful housing is termed as, which is essential as a standard for a good housing: corridor, passage, ground, setback, gateway.
A.
It's D, setback. Daylight factor is the ratio of illumination at a given point of indoors to illuminations and access is percentage. What is the minimum daylight factor recommended for the kitchen? Minimum daylight factor. It's 4%, 6%, 2%, 8%, 10%. The
2%.
minimum daylight lit factor, in which we will call the room day lit.
B.
It's C.
6%.
It's C, yes, 2%. The engineer designed a house wanted to make sure that floor space is adequate per person for good housing. The minimum floor space required per person is, it could be it's 90 square feet, so hundreds is the closest, so E is the right answer. There is currently air conditioning systems with used for cooling exhaust air to the outside. The most effective ventilation system for the house would be most effective open window ventilation fan, ceiling fan, exhaust fan, or ERV.
E.
Yes,
A.
E is the right answer, ERV. And medical conditions that affect people who works is in that type of place where air is not healthy and unnatural. There is a condition that is highlighted as six building syndrome, heat exhaustion, heat syncope, dizziness, and suffocation.
A.
A.
Yes, six building syndrome. So this is the key. This is a YouTube link, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amber. Very nice presentation, very brilliantly done, like always. And the most important thing is that all the important points in healthful housing, they are included in your slides. The best part is your MCQs. Very well done. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz, ma'am.
Allah Hafiz.